let's get this going. All right, so good morning, everybody. Today is our makeup class for Wednesday because we did have that snow day on Tuesday, and so now we are just going to do this real fast. I won't keep you too long today. I want to make sure that you kind of just get some information and then get some practices, and all the keys and stuff should be uploaded for you. So does anybody have any questions before we get started? All right, if you do, don't hesitate to kind of holler out, and I'll touch base with each of you by the end of the period. So I hope that everybody's watched this week's lectures. So if you didn't come to class or anything, I think everybody came to class here. But we have the information for this week is stock system and formula weight and percent composition. So because it was a weird week, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what the material was for this week. And then I do have the participation points put into the folder for this week. I think I set it up right, so it's you only had class on Monday and Wednesday. I guess I could have put Thursday, but you know, there's never a right answer with participation points. So go ahead and do those sometime today, and I will, as I always do, go over them and make sure that if it gives you a 0 and you were here, I'll make sure you get your grade right. Okay, we did write your quiz. It is going to be tomorrow. I feel like this is such a weird week, but tomorrow is Friday. It's going to be open from 7:30 to 1:30. It is not going to be a super hard quiz or anything. It is going to be 15 questions and 30 points. So it will have all types of naming, binary, polyatomic, and stock system naming. So it'll have all 3 types, and you'll have to calculate 2 formula weight questions and 2% composition questions. So my suggestion on the quiz is that you have a calculator, and you also want your periodic table and your polyatomic ion sheet with you when you're taking the quiz tomorrow. If you don't have either of those things, you can always write me an email and I can email them to you. I think the suggestion that I have is to make sure that you have your charges at the top of the periodic table. Make sure you know that the stock system is anything that you are naming that's down here in the transition metal area. And then I wrote IDE on my periodic table to remind me of those non-metals being the IDE ending when you're naming with those. Okay. So when I was looking at trying to set up what to do today, I thought we would start with the easier stuff and then get a little bit harder. So if in your packet, you can take a look at where it says formula weight and percent composition number 2. Formula weight and percent composition number 2. So we're going to go there. I think this is the easier of the 2 things. Formula weight doesn't really seem to give people too much grief. I'm going to show you a couple places where people might have a hard time. And that the biggest mistake, if I see a mistake at all, is going to be when you're listing out your elements, or if you're having a hard time figuring out the subscripts. So one thing that I saw yesterday is that some people think, oh, well, this is N and H together. And then you can't find a formula, you can't find a mass for N and H. So one reminder is be very careful, is you're pulling out each individual element. So this is nitrogen, hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. So you need to pull every single thing out. This one has carbon, hydrogen, fluorine, and bromine. Okay, so that's one of the first mistakes that happen. The second mistake that happens is people with their subscripts are having a hard time. This is 3 calciums. Remember, the 2 distributes through. So how many phosphorus do you have? You have 2 phosphorus, and we have 8 oxygen. Common misconception is that people add those together, okay? So you want to make sure you know how your distributive properties work. So what I want to do is I'd like to go through, we've already done water before, so it's kind of a waste of time. So let's go through and do one of these together. I'm going to do one of your formula weights and one of your percent compositions just to make sure everybody's on the same page and see if anybody has any questions. So first thing, let's do aluminum oxide. Remember, that's the name of it, IDE ending, because oxygen is off the periodic table. When you're doing this, how many aluminums do you have? I have 2 aluminums, or aluminum and oxygen. I have 2 aluminums, and I have 3 oxygens. 2 aluminums and 3 oxygens. Then I get my periodic table out. Remember, you're rounding to the nearest whole number is fine. Aluminum is 26.98, so I'm going to call that bad boy 27. And then oxygen, you will eventually have this memorized because like almost everything has oxygen, it seems like. Oxygen is 16. 15.999, if you will. Great. Then remember from yesterday, all you have to do is multiply. Some of this can be mental math. 2 times 27 is 54. 3 times 16 is 48. Those are your elemental masses. Then all you have to do to get your formula weight, if you think about the weight of the formula, the whole formula, how much does it weigh? We're going to add 54 and 48, and you should get around 102. Okay. Perfect. So if tomorrow the question asks you to give me a formula weight, well, that's an odd thing. We don't want to. Ooh. Oh, perfect question. So there are, and I think I said this later in the day, and I forgot to tell you first period. I apologize. That's a great question. The actual units are called atomic mass units. They're AMU, if you care. Now, this is going to be the only number that we don't care if there is a unit on there. It's very uncommon in science for it to be okay that there's a number without a unit, except for this number in particular. And I do model that after the AP Chem teacher, so he also doesn't require units on formula weight. But because atomic mass units are so small, we don't really necessarily have you put them on because they don't really mean anything to us. Like if we're measuring out a larger thing, like it would make difference if it was kilograms or grams or pounds or things like that. But when we're talking about formula weight, there's only one unit, and it's so small that we kind of just let it go. So if on a test, even in AP Chem, when we get back to writing on actual paper, if you were to write what's the formula of water and you wrote 18 and had no unit, that would be absolutely fine. Okay, but if you care, the unit is called AMU, or atomic mass units, and each one is the mass of a proton. Okay, so perfect. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. That was a great question. I think I addressed it later in the day, but I did not address it with you guys. My apologies. So perfect. So that is your formula weight. Okay. Now percent composition just has you go one step further. So I'm going to do the bottom here. For calcium fluoride, you have calcium and fluorine. And then I'm going to look up that I have 1 calcium and 2 fluorines. Hopefully you can see that there. Awesome. Then I'm going to grab my periodic table. And calcium I see is 40 when you round it. And fluorine is 18.998. So we're going to call that 19. 40 times 1 is 40, and 2 times 19 is 38. Then you're going to add them up, and you're going to get your formula weight of 78. And I'm probably going too fast. I just realized that. Now, that is your formula weight. In order to do percent composition, you just have to go one step further. And you would know, like if you said, hey, I got a 40 out of 78 on a test, how did I do? What was my grade? You just divide 40 by the part over the whole times 100. So you would put in your calculator 40 divided by 78. You could either multiply it by 100 or you could move the decimal twice, however you kind of do whenever you're calculating your grade. And you would see 40 divided by 78 times 100 is 51.3. And then 38 divided by 78 times 100 is 48.7. And then I always like to take a little look and see if it's close to 100%. And it is. So that means I did it right, as long as I got my formula weight right. Okay. So that you're going to have 2 formula weight questions and 2% composition questions on your quiz tomorrow. Does anybody have any questions over that content? I think this content is pretty straightforward and I don't say easy, but I don't think that there's a lot of room for error on this. So I will move forward if nobody has any other questions about formula weight and percent comp. Perfect. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is, if you flip the paper over, it has ionic bonds, Bellwork E, all ionic naming. And this is where, if you're going to have an issue on tomorrow's quiz, it's going to probably be in the naming. And the reason why is because of the 3 different types of naming. There's binary, there's polyatomic, and then there's stock system. And I don't think there's really a big problem with binary and polyatomic. They're the same thing. I think you know how to do that. The hardest thing will be deciding when you need to use that stock system of naming. And remember, when you do the stock system of naming, you write the name, the charge, and the anion name. So the first thing I would do, and if I was giving you a quiz, it would look just like this and it would all be on one page. But when you look at something like potassium and carbonate, so let's say we look at this first one here, you need to decide if it is a transition metal. And if it is a transition metal, then and only then do you need a stock system of naming. And so hopefully you see potassium here is way over here. He's not a transition metal, so you would just name him normally. Then, though, if we look at this next one, this is nickel and bromine. So let's find nickel, which is way down here. Why am I having a hard time finding him? Nickel. Yes, sorry. Okay, so that means he requires a stock system. So when I usually give this quiz, I tell students to go through and say, before you even do anything, and if you want to put your little parentheses on here so you're like, hey, don't forget that. Boron is over here. He's not a stock system. Don't worry about him. Ooh, silver. Silver is right down here. He is a stock system. So what I'm going to do is make sure here. Sodium, group 1, not a stock system. How about cobalt? Ooh, cobalt's right here. He does need a stock system name. So again, what you're looking for is if they fall in the transition metal. So the only bummer about the quiz tomorrow is you get one at a time because it's multiple choice. So that means as soon as a naming comes up, you need to stop and check and see if it falls in the transition metals. And if it falls into the transition metals, you need the stock system name. Okay? Other than that, you kind of just name it as you see it. Naming is really easy unless it's stock system. So let's do one of those. For this one, no stock system. So we see potassium. So that's going to be the first word. And then CO3. Remember, if you see a polyatomic ion, you're looking on your polyatomic ion sheet, and that is potassium carbonate. Okay, awesome. Then we come to the next one, and it needs a stock system name. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, the first name is nickel. We still leave that. But what we need to find out about nickel is we need to figure out what its charge is. So what you're going to do, and as I spelled nickel wrong, you see nothing. Typing this morning quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to look here, and we're going to see that bromine is a -1 charge. Okay, and that's because he's in group 7. Bromine, -1 charge. And how many bromines do I have? Well, I have 4. So this whole side is -4. And so how many nickels do I have? I have 1 nickel. And if I have 1 nickel, that means that whole thing has to be a charge of what? In order to get neutral, that needs to be nickel 4. And then you just write your anion name, which this one happens to be bromide. Awesome. Good. Then for the next one, it is not a stock system name. So we're just going to write B is boron. And S, if it comes off the periodic table here, you just know that it needs an IDE ending. Sulfide, boron sulfide. Okay, so the only big tricky thing with the binary and the polyatomic is if it comes off the periodic table, it has an IDE ending. If it comes off of here, you just write the name. Okay, let's do one more here, and then I'll leave you go. You will see that silver is a transition metal, so it needs a special name. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write what it is. It's silver. Hopefully we spelled this one right. Then I look up oxygen on my periodic table, and my periodic table tells me that oxygen is a -2. However, I know this side needs to be +2, but I have 2 silvers. what two things are going to add up in order to become a positive 2. That means each silver has to have a charge of 1. And then we just write oxide. Okay. So what I want to kind of do is leave some for you to practice here. So you have a couple more. I will tell you, obviously, we said that cobalt was a transition metal, so he needs a special name. There are 2 more that need a special name, and I'm going to leave that up to you to find, to see if you can't find the 2 more on that page that need the special name. When you are writing formulas, the biggest thing is that they need to be neutral. Okay, that's where you're going to miss points if you miss points tomorrow. So as soon as you see you need to write a formula, you need to stop. This number tells me that this titanium is a +2. I look up nitrate on my periodic table, and I see that that's a -1. So if you were taking this quiz, I would say just go through. Magnesium's a +2 off the periodic table. Oxygen's a -2 off the periodic table. Manganese, this is a +3. It's telling me that. Oxide is -2. Okay, so you always have to figure out the charge when you're writing the formula. Then you just write it so that you find it to be neutral. Titanium's a +2. Nitrate, which is an NO3, is a -1. So in order to be neutral, I need titanium. Then I need my NO3, which is nitrate, in parentheses, because I need multiple of those, and I need a 2. Titanium nitrate. Awesome. Magnesium is a +2. Oxygen is a -2. So I just need 1 of each. Would have been nice if you wrote the anion first, and it could have been OMG. But, you know, it's not the way it works. Then I'll do one more for you guys here, and then manganese is a +3. Oxide is a -2, because again, this number in the parentheses doesn't tell me how many I have. It tells me the charge. If you see 3 and 2, you can always think that you need to get them to go into 6. So in order to get manganese to be a +6, I need Mn2, excuse me. And oxygen, I need 3. Please notice they're not parentheses around either one of those things because they're all off the periodic table. The only time you use parentheses is if you want more than one polyatomic ion. Okay. So with that said, I do have the key. It also should be, let me make sure. Oh, that's not, you don't want that. It should also be on, what am I doing? The Thursday worksheet keys. So what I want you guys to do before tomorrow is do a couple formula weight and percent comp. Here is your all ionic naming. Okay, the one that we were just working on. And then also in the packet, just because you can't do too much naming, there is another, and then this is what exactly what your quiz would have looked like if we would have taken the quiz in class. Here is another one that is all types of naming. And this is exactly what, if you can do this worksheet, you would be able to do your quiz. And so you can see on my key, I made sure I went through and said, all right, manganese needs a stock system name, titanium needs a stock system name, zirconium, chromium. So you can see on the key kind of my thinking as far as naming as well. So those 3 keys are there. Your participation points are here. I'm just going to run through, see how everybody's doing. The only other thing I did want to do, and I'm sorry that this is not live with you in school, but if you had any more questions about scheduling, I know that we didn't get a ton of time to talk yesterday with my in-class people, but if you have any questions on scheduling, when I holler at you today to get your attendance, just go ahead and let me know if you have any questions. Scheduling, I think, is going to start next week. We have an extended advisory on Thursday, and the next Thursday after that for the next cohort is when you guys are going to put in your scheduling stuff. So again, you have to have at least 3 science credits, but suggestion that you obviously take more. And so if you have any questions, we can chat about it. If not, I'm just going to let you guys go after this, and then you can finish your worksheets, and then you just have to make sure you take your quiz tomorrow by 1:30. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to go over with everybody. Stop.